Picture this. 60,000 years ago, there were at least 4 kinds of humans walking the earth. Now, there's just us. Neanderthals vanished, Denisovans disappeared, others faded without a trace. But here's the weird part. Biologically, we weren't the obvious winners. Neanderthals had bigger brains, Denisovans were built for toughness, and the others? Still a mystery. So why are you watching this video instead of, say, a Neanderthal YouTube channel? The textbook answer is better tools or luck, but that's not the full story. What most people never realize, the real edge was psychological, hidden quirks in how we think, how we trust, and how we tell stories. And these quirks didn't just keep us alive, they rewired the fate of our entire species. So what secret sauce did Homo sapiens have that the others didn't? Let's start with a campfire, because that's where the real story begins. Imagine 2 tribes. One sits in silence, the other erupts in gossip, laughter, and plans for tomorrow. Most people think language was just for hunting instructions. But the weird part is, language is designed for something stranger, weaving trust webs. Here's what's really happening. When we gossip, judge, and joke, we're mapping out who's loyal and who's not. Neanderthals? They had language, sure, but not the same social sparkle. Archaeologists find tiny groups, fewer social artifacts, and almost no evidence of playful imagination. Now flip it around. Sapiens villages show beads, carved symbols, evidence of inside jokes. Why does this matter? Because trust lets you build alliances bigger than your family. A tribe of 40? Easy. A network of 150? Only possible when people trust strangers, on faith. That's the Dunbar number, the human brain's social limit. But even the Dunbar number has a catch. You need glue to hold it together. Enter the real superpower. Shared stories, myths, rituals, little lies we all agree to believe. Try running a group of 100 Neanderthals with no stories to keep them in sync. Chaos. But here's the twist. Believing in invisible things, gods, taboos, even made-up rules, is the glue that scaled us up. This isn't just ancient history. Today, we call it culture. Back then, it was survival. So, what happened to the other humans? Here's the uncomfortable answer. They couldn't scale trust. Picture a Neanderthal band. Strong, smart, but stuck in a tiny bubble. Easy pickings when the climate turned. Meanwhile, sapiens could call on distant cousins for help because of a story they both believed. And that's not just about numbers. More people meant more innovation. The weird part? Ideas compound. One tribe invents a needle, another a drum. Next thing, you've got tailored clothing and music festivals. Neanderthals made tools, yes, but they barely changed for thousands of years. Sapiens? Every generation, something new. Here's what most textbooks miss. Innovation is a social sport, not a solo act. Try inventing calculus alone in a cave. Good luck. But there's another twist, the psychology of empathy. Modern brain scans show that our species is hypersensitive to others' emotions. That lets us synchronize not just actions, but moods, goals, and even hopes. Neanderthals likely cared for their sick, but sapiens built networks of care, spreading across continents. The reason this matters, networks outlast disasters. Solo heroes don't. When volcanoes blew or food ran out, it was the group that mattered, every time. Now, let's zoom in on a single overlooked skill, the handshake. A handshake isn't just a greeting, it's a contract, a tiny test of trust. Anthropologists find evidence of trade routes, shells from the ocean found thousands of miles inland. Translation: sapiens could make deals with strangers. That's wild. Neanderthals? Trade rarely left their home turf. What most people get wrong, survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the most connected. Now, let's pull back. What does all this have to do with you? You're wired to belong. Your brain is built to trust, to share, and to invent, if you let it. But there's a catch. The same quirks that let us survive can also make us vulnerable. We believe stories, even if they're false. We trust groups, sometimes too much. That's the double-edged sword of being human. In a world of fake news and viral myths, our ancient psychology still runs the show. But here's the hopeful twist. The same skills that let us outlast Neanderthals can help us now, if we pay attention. So next time you shake a hand, share a meme, or tell a story, remember, you're practicing the quirks that made us the last humans standing. And that brings us back to the question, why only us? It wasn't brains or brawn. It was the invisible threads of trust, empathy, and imagination. Threads you use every day, usually without even realizing. So the next time you wonder what makes you human, remember, it's not just your DNA. It's your mind's quirks, for better and worse. And if you want to see just how those quirks shape the way we fall for scams, check out our video on the psychology of persuasion, linked right here. But let's dig deeper. How exactly did these quirks evolve? What forced our ancestors to trust, to share, to invent? Imagine a harsh ice age. Food scarce, predators everywhere, and the cold biting down every night. In those moments, trust wasn't optional. It was the only insurance policy. You couldn't survive alone, not for long. Even the best hunter needed a backup plan. But here's a paradox. The more you trust, the more you risk betrayal. Human evolution is a balancing act between openness and suspicion. Every culture invented ways to test loyalty, secret handshakes, rituals, even dangerous dares. Mess up the ritual? You're out. Pass the test? Welcome to the tribe. And that's not just primitive drama. It's the origin of everything from job interviews to college hazing. But let's not forget the flip side. Our minds are so eager to connect, we sometimes invent enemies where none exist. Anthropologists call this parochial altruism, helping your own group even at the cost of outsiders. It's a double bind. The same spark that started civilization also lit the fuse for conflict. But here's a twist most people miss. Trust isn't just a moral virtue, it's a survival hack. In fact, economists ran experiments. Groups with high trust grow richer, faster, and more resilient, even today. Want a modern example? In 1995, Robert Putnam found that Italian regions with more social clubs, more trust, had better schools, safer streets, stronger economies. Turns out, the secret sauce still works, 60,000 years later. But let's go back to stories for a second. Myths aren't just bedtime tales, they're blueprints for who matters, who belongs, and what's possible. Ever notice every culture has a flood myth, a trickster, a hero's journey? That's no accident. Shared stories shape our sense of us, and sometimes who we fear as them. Here's a curveball. Even money is a shared story. Dollar bills only work because we all agree they do. Try paying a Neanderthal with a 20. Blank stare guaranteed. But invent a story about value, everyone plays along, and suddenly you've got markets, cities, civilization. And here's an even weirder twist. Our brains reward us for sharing stories, even if they're rumors. Dopamine spikes when we pass on information others didn't know, especially if it's surprising. That's why gossip is addictive, and why fake news spreads like wildfire. But here's the upside. The superpower of sharing, when pointed at the right problems, can spark revolutions. Think about the Arab Spring, or Me Too, movements fueled by shared stories and trust between strangers. Our ancestors would have called it magic. Today, we call it going viral. And here's a final curiosity. Some scientists believe our minds evolved for storytelling before they evolved for truth. That's why we fall for legends, urban myths, and conspiracy theories. Our brains just love a good plot. But the plot twist? We can choose which stories to believe and which ones to leave behind. So next time you hear a wild tale, remember, your ancestors survived by telling stories. But it's your turn to decide which ones shape the future. Let's pull back one more layer. What about art? Why do we paint, carve, and dance? Some researchers think art was a hidden weapon, a way to tag your tribe, signal creativity, and attract allies. Cave art appears wherever Homo Sapiens lived, absent almost everywhere Neanderthals did. Art shouts, "We're here, we belong, and we imagine together." And that, weirdly, is a survival tactic. Tribes with distinctive art attract more followers and share ideas faster. The more memorable your tribe, the bigger your network, the safer you are. Art's not just pretty. Sometimes, it's a flag you wave in the dark. And think about music. The earliest flutes are over 40,000 years old. Music synchronized hearts and movements before we had megaphones. Try launching a hunt or a migration without a beat to march to. Good luck. So, when you hum along with a song, you're echoing the same pulse that once held tribes together. In the end, the last human standing wasn't the one with the sharpest spear, it was the one with the sharpest mind for connection. Our quirks, storytelling, trust, empathy, art, and music outcompeted brute force. That's the secret legacy you carry in your skull. And every time you reach out, share a laugh, or help a stranger, you're lighting that torch again. So, if you ever doubt yourself, remember, the quirks that made you human are still your best survival tools. And that's why, out of all the humans who ever walked the earth, you're still here to pass the story onward.